What is up, everybody? Thank you tuning in Crypto Street Podcast. This is Dale. Uh, I'm so excited to bring you tonight's guest, but we'll get there in 1 second, as we always do. We've been waiting for this one for a while. Actually, we just reached out. Blah blah blah. Who cares? Let's Killer. What's going on, my man?
Hey dude, doing well. Chilling, trying to make sense of what has been happening the past couple of weeks in terms of price action, or probably especially the past week. But hopefully, we'll gain some insight into that during this episode.
Yeah, I think it's perfect timing to have tonight's guest. But
Yeah.
we were supposed to start recording 15 minutes ago. It is Wednesday night, the 17th. But I just want everyone to know I had to go to someone's house and kill a bat. That's why we were running late. So I know everyone's gonna be like, "Holy shit, this guy is such a hillbilly," but I promise I'm not.
I thought you were joking too. Like I'm sitting here, I'm like, all right, ready to go. And Dale's like, I gotta go kill a bat real quick. And I was like, what? Like a bat? Like, can't you just tell the bat to wait? Or like, not really.
So we'll skip the bullshit. Not really, kind of do our intro because we really want to spend the time with tonight's guest. Flood is the guest. Everyone, I'm sure, listening knows him, and if not, you must be living under a rock. I would say, and I think Killer agrees with me. Flood, you're probably one of our favorite traders per se, and probably one of the best in the entire space. And if you aren't following him, you're nuts. Personally, think that. But so what's going on?
Oh man, that's quite the introduction. Yeah, I don't I mean, you never really know, right? Like with this space, you kind of you really never have any idea of like who someone is. And I think that's kind of, like at least when I first meet people in crypto, especially because, it's mainly online, you really don't have any like idea of who someone is or like what they're about.
Right.
And that is so different from, like traditional finance or other kind of like, I guess, sectors, you could say, where like everyone has like, oh, I work here, I do X, or it's like, whereas with crypto, you have no idea. It's like this basket of all these people who, randomly got interested in Bitcoin or were like selling drugs on the internet or were like buying fake IDs or something. I mean, you have no idea like what someone was doing before. And now we're here, right? Now we're sitting together, on a podcast. But yeah, no, thanks for the introduction. I mean, I'm happy to be here.
Well, and especially to kind of build on that a little bit is, people can inspect Element on the browser that they use and, really seem like they're trading these huge contracts on MEX or Deribit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, you really truly don't know what people are really doing or if they even own any Bitcoin. So I think like you do a great job of being transparent, and I've seen you post calls that didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, and you could still go back through your feed and find those. So that's kind of how someone's true, because fact of the matter is you're not gonna have 100% hit rate. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, so, it's impossible, right? I mean, the only person with 100% hit rate was like Madoff, right? That's kind of the joke. That's and other people who run Ponzi schemes where you kind of have guaranteed returns, and that's life, right? I mean, there's risk in anything. You walk outside and you're taking a risk. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate the transparency, and I'm glad you guys kind of noticed that, because I think it's really easy, especially on Twitter, to just like delete stuff and kind of sweep stuff under the rug. And obviously, I'm not going to like call attention to places where I was wrong, but I think it's important to show like, look, it's a market. Sometimes it's a total coin flip. I mean, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. Sometimes nobody has any idea where it's going to go. And sometimes I feel like it might be obvious, but it is important to, accept losing. And that's a big part of trading, which a lot of people don't talk about, is, trading is not for everyone. Not because of the stress mainly, but a lot of people just can't lose, right? I mean, a lot of trades you're going to take are going to end up, deleting money out of your account, right? Especially on MEX when you get, stopped at the bottom or something. But with trading, it's such a unique kind of career choice and career path, because a lot of people do lose. In fact, the majority of people will be majority losers, just like gambling, just like any other sort of, risk taking non 9 to 5 normie job, right? But that's what's also beautiful, right? Is because you can just multiply your wallet through, successful trading, and multiply your, financial status through, like, there are very few professions that give you the mixture of like freedom and the ability to, make exponential gains, right? That kind
Totally.
of crypto trading does. So that's what originally drew me to the space. And why I'm so thankful for it is it's like, this is, it's so unique, and it's such a unique period in time where there still is room for kind of traders like us before, the robots take over, quote unquote, right?
Right.
Which is already kind of happening, but
which it's, and now that you say that too, we had Howard Linzone on, traditional market kind of trader guy, and he said when he was on with us, he said that the thing that he likes about crypto is, that the average trader, or being a trader, was kind of dying and fading. So he says, if this is what's going to get the next generation of traders, out there and people interested in it, he's like, I'm totally for it. So that's kind of cool. That's what I just, stocks and stuff like that, just at the beginning, didn't really appeal to me. And then I saw the volatility in this market space, and it was just like, holy shit, like you said, this is something that if I sit and hone my skills, it's something that, is different than everything else. So that's kind of cool to hear you say that. But while you're at it, let's just kind of keep piggybacking on that. Kind of tell us a little bit about your background in markets and trading, whether it's you started out in traditional finance or the crypto space. Maybe just kind of walk everyone a little bit through that.
Yeah, so I'll be pretty brief, just because, I mean, as many of you guys know, I am like fully anonymous. I think I've met up with 2 people total. And they were like very, very close friends I had known for, a year and a half plus.
Sure.
So I'm pretty vague, due to the fact that, this is kind of like the wild, wild west, right? And I do value my family's privacy and safety, first and foremost.
Yep.
So for me, the, anonymous Twitter account is kind of like the outlet where I can be super, like, braggadocious and kind of be, pretty flamboyant, I guess, or whatever, and draw a lot of hate and a lot of attention. But yeah, I mean, I am pretty careful with my identity, and I, appreciate you guys respecting that as well. But yeah, so I worked in finance very briefly out of school. I wasn't in the trading side. And then I got interested in Bitcoin. I think I first heard of Bitcoin, like early 2013. And funny story, I don't think I've ever told the story, but I actually crashed my car, and being the responsible, 20-something I was at that time, I used the insurance payment to buy Bitcoin, basically like the version of an all-in that, a young 20-something can do, right? Without any parents' help or anything like that. So yeah, that was my kind of like, and I had always been interested, and I didn't have, a ton of free capital. And I was like, oh, well, do I like walking, or do I like gambling on Bitcoin? So it was kind of like the pros and cons, like, oh, and this was a little bit before Uber had been mainstream. So it was a bit of a choice, right? But yeah, no, I kind of was drawn to the space mainly due to the inefficiencies in the market, right? I mean, if we remember, like back in 2013, there were like huge price discrepancies, especially in different countries, right? Depending on like the KYC, AML laws, and how prohibitive the exchanges were for signups and whatnot, and on ramping. We really were like limited to select few of exchanges. So you had a lot of opportunity to do stuff like, buy just very, very standard ARB, right? Just like buy on one place, sell on another place. And you were only limited by how much capital you had, how fast you could do it. And that was about it, right? And then suddenly BitMEX comes along, and I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of what this space had been missing, was a platform that people trusted for some reason, that actually worked, that offered a good amount of leverage with futures, right? Initially, BitMEX was like super complicated, and for the average person, right, they had a bunch of like Quanto contracts. They had BitMEX like yen, won. They had a bunch of like altcoins that people don't, like, new people in this space have never heard of, like Factom, and Yeah, and just a bunch of like horrific illiquid altcoin futures, and then we've kind of blossomed into this like almost hyper efficient space where like traders can sign up in 10 minutes and have access to the best liquidity, which is like kind of the opposite of what traditional markets are, right? If you think about it, I mean, if you wanted to sign up on like Interactive Brokers, you have commissions and whatnot, and you have to go through this like long arduous process to actually begin to trade. But for BitMEX, it's like, hey, you can be anonymous, you can VPN in, we don't care. You as long as you're gonna come and gamble, it's like a casino, right? As long as you're gonna come, you're of age, can spend money, listen, you can trade. And that, I think, has led to a lot of the expansion in the space. Is like, before we were lacking in infrastructure, and now we're kind of seeing like this bubble of a ton of derivatives exchanges popping up, and just because they've seen how well BitMEX has been doing, right? Like, you have Bitfinex coming out with derivatives, you have Alameda's platform FTX, shout out to them, coming out with a derivatives platform that's doing quite well. They did like 300 million in volume, and then you have Binance coming out with margin trading as well. So that's kind of like a big draw to people, is, hey, like, I can come spend money, I can come get that dopamine rush and trade. And then people who are more experienced and have been in the space for a while are like, hey, EC money, people who want to cross the spread all day long and just essentially like pay outrageous fees to trade all day, that's totally fine with us. So I mean, we're kind of I think we're still in this gold rush period that people may have thought ended, especially like late 2018. There were, including a lot of friends of mine, having a considerable, and myself included, but I kind of had personal issues that I was dealing with, separate to Bitcoin price. So it gave me a little bit of a numbness to the actual like realization of, hey, like, my net worth just halved.
Sure,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
That's pretty, it's a pretty brutal realization, but family comes first. But anyways, I mean, yeah, it's like we're seeing this gold rush, and we're kind of, we're still rallying. We had a kind of, we dunked down a little bit as people decided to market sell on pretty illiquid spot exchanges. And it's clearly coordinated, right? Like, the market at this point has, the winners and losers have stratified their war chests, let's say, right? I mean, you see firms like Alameda, and you see other, prop shops like Star Beta and stuff that have done really, really well. And then you see places like, I mean, I don't really want to name names, but other places that are having like massive fund redemptions, right? So as people's, AUM grows, their impact on the market grows as well, right? So we're kind of seeing the, winners and losers kind of be settled through this rally, right? Like, a lot of prop shops, were basically like 1-to-1 hedged under 5K, because you were kind of crazy. It was really hard to convince someone to have like an all-in long fund when Bitcoin's trading and chopping around super low volatility at like 3K. So that's kind of changed. It feels like jobs are kind of falling off trees at this point. But yeah, no, it's super interesting where a lot of stuff is being built kind of not behind the scenes anymore. A lot of stuff is kind of in the forefront, and you're seeing everything that people have worked on all throughout 2018 kind of coming to light and pushing the market forward, which I think this space desperately needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked about that a lot, especially throughout 2018, where it's just terrible action in the markets. I mean, for most people who are just have like a bullish bias and, don't know how to short and all that. But a lot of good things were happening, and the market didn't care because we were in the midst of just a cyclical kind of downtrend. But like, a lot of really bullish stuff happened. And I think it was really important for people to keep that in perspective, but it's easy to get taken over by the emotions. Cause like you said, you open Blockfolio and you're down by a quarter, and then you're down by another quarter the next week. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that like a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes. I think you mentioned like at the forefront now. I think today's a really good example of that. I mean, just look at everything that happened in front of Congress. You had Meltem Demirors talking about shitcoins and It almost seems like an augmented reality thing where we're like, is this really happening? Like this is somebody we follow on Twitter, or we see shit posting, and they're talking in front of congressmen, like explaining what a shit coin is, or how a blockchain actually works, or what decentralization is. It's been pretty nutty to see, and I think for anybody new to the space, like they don't really have quite that much perspective. And speaking for Dale and I, like we have a little bit more. We've been in for a few years. But I think we kind of have just enough to see how different that was than just a couple of years ago.
Right.
So Flood, let's kind of talk when you're looking at entering a trade, and whether this is, I don't know for certain, I don't, based off your feed, I don't know if you trade a lot of alts or if you're strictly do a lot. I know you do a lot of BitMEXing, but let's say what is it you look to identify when you're looking to get into a position?
Oof.
And again, you don't have to get too detailed to give away your secrets, but maybe something that someone that's listening that isn't as experienced as you are, that they could identify with, or maybe go out and research a little bit more, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the great things about this space as well, is there's so many ways to trade it, right? I mean, you don't need to be a programmer that has, a master's in computer science in order to make money in this market, right? So I mean, me specifically, my style of trading is definitely swing trading. I mean, I'm definitely looking at the larger picture. I'm taking, 3-4 trades maximum a week. And, maybe I get stopped out of 2 of them, and then one is, a 5 to 10% runner that makes my entire month potentially, right? And then, some weeks I get stopped out of every single trade. And, I'm not posting every single trade on Twitter. I'm not, 100% transparent due to the fact that sometimes, maybe I don't want to get front run, or maybe I think the trade isn't as high probability as I would like, but I'm taking it because of other factors. But yeah, I mean, specifically when I'm looking to get into a trade, as most people know who have been following, and if you're not, then I typically am like taking long positions. I mean, that's like my bread and butter. And I can explain like my rationale behind that a bit later when we get to like the more like nitty gritty of BitMEX, if we do that. But essentially, like Bitcoin is such, my thesis is this, like Bitcoin is such a trend following asset. Like once we're bearish, we'll be bearish for weeks and weeks and weeks. And once we're bullish, we'll rally for literally an entire quarter. Like we saw from, April to end of June, right? We went from 4K to 14K. It's like, that's a 10K move. And you don't have to catch all of that, right? I mean, you can literally just catch 20% in the middle, and you're outperforming the market by 20%. You now have more, if you're still bullish, you now have more spot exposure that, you're making US dollar profits on. But yeah, when I'm looking to get into a trade, I'm typically looking for a confluence of things that I have deemed like actionable signals. So I'm all about indicators or trading suites that will literally tell me, hey, you should go long here. Not, oh, RSI is 90. That doesn't really give me a ton of info, right? I mean, I can do RSI in my head, right? It's a 14 candle look back. But just because RSI is high doesn't mean anything. RSI could be high for a week and a half. And if you went short the first day it went high, you just got blown out, right? So I'm looking for a confluence of factors that essentially will dictate how I should size the trade, where my stop should be. And typically I'm scaling in and out of positions just because liquidity has been pretty poor, just because Bitcoin has been so volatile. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like a lot of market making firms have been getting drilled because the moves are just so fast. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things that I like, to be specific, is like ATR, right? Average true range by I think it's Sylvain Vervoot. It's pretty good, just gut check on higher time frames like daily, 6 hour, 4 hour, just very simple trend following. Essentially, you can kind of think of it like a moving average, right? And then I also like kind of like the VPVR, which a lot of people didn't use up until like 2017, and then suddenly it had this huge resurgence. And I like that rather than volume by time. I like volume by price along with, the open interest of BitMEX, because you can see where a lot of positions are trapped. And in a highly levered market, that makes a big difference, right? Because it kind of turns into this like domino effect where it's like, okay, volatility is super high, market makers aren't supplying a ton of liquidity, a lot of over leveraged long positions specifically might be trapped, and it's asymmetric risk when you take a short and a long on BitMEX. So if we have a 5% move to the downside, average leverage is, I don't know, like 20x on BitMEX, you're going to have a huge cascading liquidation move, right? And then you're typically, the point of like maximum financial opportunity is close to where you would think the bottom is. And then it makes your risk pretty easy because you say, hey, my pain threshold is 1% on this move, right? I'm going to buy $1 million worth of swaps. And then, if I'm bounced out, I'm losing 10K. That's really not that bad, right? I mean, and your upside is potentially 3 to 4 to 5%. And again, I hate the like traders that are like, oh, my trade is, R, like I'm taking like this risk for this reward. It's like, but yeah, there's no guarantee the price is going to go to your target, right? So I could put a target at 40K and I could have a stop $1 away and then I'd have like infinite risk reward, right? I mean, that doesn't really mean anything. Yeah. Right. So I kind of, that's something
that
I
always kind of
gets
me too. Cause I'm always like, you're making both of these. I mean, you're essentially basing that, the risk reward off of what you're seeing. So, but I agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I mean, that's exactly what, you notice in the space, as you continue, engaging with people and meeting new people and talking to people, is you kind of slowly realize like, it's not a ton of people who have traded their entire life. Like the age demographic, and it makes sense, right? With the 24-hour market, is typically like early 20s to mid 30s, I would say. So you don't have a ton of traders that have like 30 years of trading experience and they have all these like incredible trading suites and they've spent years developing it, because Bitcoin is a relatively new market. And, in order to get into Bitcoin, you have to have some degree of like technological prowess, right? I mean, you don't have to be a super genius to understand like a Bitcoin transaction, but it is kind of daunting at first, right? I mean, I think everyone's like triple checked their first Bitcoin transaction, right? Like I remember like checking it 10 times, looking at every letter, right? I mean, it's a new sensation for a lot of people to kind of trust, like, is my money going to get deposited into the other exchange? I mean, you have no idea, right? At first.
And then you're sending like 0.0001 just to make sure. You're like, okay, if I'm just going to send the tiniest amount because I don't want to lose what I just bought.
Exactly, to test it. I mean, oh man. Yeah, no. And then, also, I mean, he's probably going to kill me for this, but I use a lot of Insilicos. You guys can follow him on Twitter. He designs a lot of really cool trading suites that have actually helped me out a lot. And I use them pretty much every day or when I trade. So if you guys, and I believe they're free. I mean, they're free for me. I have no idea if he charges or not. But yeah, super helpful, super clever guy. And but the trading suite is kind of like not the most important part for Bitcoin, and for assets that don't have like tangible things that we can price them off of. Like they don't have revenue. Like Bitcoin doesn't have revenue. Bitcoin doesn't have like users. Bitcoin doesn't have it has like a network effect and it has active wallets, but those aren't 100% corollary with like price increases, right? So for Bitcoin, that's where like I think TA has really had like a resurgence. And I've heard this from a lot of like legacy guys. They're like, oh yeah, like these TA kids are actually doing pretty good because it makes sense, right? You're taking asymmetrical risk reward trades all day long, and that will give you some sort of advantage over people that are just gambling. So there still is like a quote unquote edge in this market, and that's the most important thing for trading. Like entries, exits, like where you're looking to trade, how you're looking to trade. If you're a scalper, if you're an algo trader, like you just need to have a provable edge. And then once you think or have a hypothesis that, hey, I have an edge here, I believe I can make money consistently, that's when you want to test, whether it be paper trading, back testing, whatever. That's when you really want to hone your skills. And that's where the biggest improvement and the most money, clearly, because that's what we all care about, right? With trading, that's where the biggest difference is going to come in, is once you really specialize in one aspect of trading, right? I mean, there are people like NYUU on Twitter who have 1,000% returns, and he literally trades 1 minute chart. And I'm looking at him like, how is this even, done? Like, how is this feasible? But it works. And it's because, trading is so dynamic that it really opens the door for a lot of different types of people, right? I mean, there are people who are action junkies, and there are people who are better at long-term, goals, and there are people who might, be expert coders who may not want to create an algo, but they're good at fundamentally valuing, potential altcoins and stuff, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to trade and invest. So sorry to get like philosophical, but when I'm entering and exiting a trade, like, it really is common sense. I mean, seriously, it's like, hey, this asset is up 20% today. That's probably not even something I'm going to look at, right? And you'd think like, oh yeah, well, I would never. But there are people who, FOMO into alts all the time. There are people who panic sell something that hasn't even hit their stop loss all the time, right? It's when I'm looking to enter and exit trade, like, I have to have a clearly defined, this is, a nullification of my trading thesis, and this is where I'll start taking off, because I'm probably going to get euphoric on Twitter, right? And like post my P&L. So that's kind of what I'd break it down to, I think.
How do you manage like the emotions of it? Because I think everybody like kind of thinks they're above average intelligence or trading ability, and so like everyone's like, oh yeah, well, I do that. I clearly my emotions aren't going to get the best of me because I know they're a problem. But like, how do you? But I think it still affects people in a negative way. So how do you kind of grapple with that? Maybe if you are in a losing position, like, how do you kind of, I guess, do what you should do rather than what like you just kind of want to do?
Right. And that's a super important and, often not talked about aspect of trading, right? Is, when I'm in a losing position, what should I do? Well, if it hasn't, nullified what your original hypothesis was, like, hey, I'm going to buy at 10K, and if it goes below 9.5, then, I should probably get out of the trade. So you set your stop loss there, and then you should, I mean, it's easier said than done, but you really shouldn't watch the chart. You have nothing to gain. You have no, advantage by like watching the candles close and open, right? I mean, there's an exit and there's where you entered the trade. So when you're in a losing trade, I mean, managing stress, my best advice would be use that to work on other aspects of your trading. Use it to research a new indicator. Use it to, brush up on your Python skills. Use it to do more fundamental analysis on another coin. Like, the chart watching and the, obsession with like, I need to catch every single move is what ultimately kills a lot of crypto traders, on top of, the ego and whatnot. But yeah, the emotional aspect of like a losing trade, theoretically you shouldn't have one, right? Because losing is part of the game. You can't win every single trade. But all I can say is that it gets easier and easier, right? I mean, I've had massive drawdowns. I mean, and if you guys want me to get in,
looks like he muted his mic.
Yeah, I think we lost him for a second. I think your mic is muted, Flood. But just going off what he said, yeah. Oh, he's back.
Oh yeah, sorry, I unplugged my mic by accident. Moving my hand. But yeah, I mean, just to wrap it up, like, it should eventually feel the same at the end of the day. Like, a winner and a loser. It's only when like I really actually cash out the Bitcoin that I'm fully aware of, how much the money is, right? I mean, a really easy like example I give is, hey, if you lost a Bitcoin on BitMEX and you had 100, you probably wouldn't be that bummed. But if someone came over to your house and stole 10 grand cash, you'd be pissed off, right? Like, you would be, I mean, I would, it's two completely different reactions, and BitMEX makes it easy to kind of disassociate, right? Because it's XBT instead of BTC. And you don't have the US dollar value without converting it through an external tool. And that's all purposeful, right? It's all to get you to disassociate from, losing and winning, so you stay hooked into the action. Anyways, yeah, that's that that to give a long-winded answer, that's kind of like winning and losing on BitMEX eventually feels the same. I think to most people it should, or you probably won't be a successful trader, right? Because you're gonna lose.
Yeah, so I guess a certain amount of it is just like time in the game, you know, and just kind of like you can't force like psychological changes on yourself. You kind of have to go through the experience and say, oh, this will be okay. You know, I'm up still like 10x in a month, you know, even though I had a massive drawdown, I'm only up 7x in a month now. It's still not the end of the world.
Right. Yeah, it's still not the end of the world. There's always another trade. Don't revenge trade, and know when to take a break, right? I mean, if you're trading like shit, don't trade, right? Walk away. Do something else. You know, that's not tilting, right? Common poker term is like, you know, leave the table if you're not trading well.
And so you mentioned like you mainly take long positions. So I would imagine you have a pretty clear defined stop on most of these where you're like, if that happens, I'm out and I don't care how I feel or what I see, and just I'm out and I can reassess after that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that, I mean, and long and short positions, right? Especially short positions. I mean, with longs, sometimes you'll have a little more flexibility if you're, let's say, like trading news or something. Maybe Bitcoin has a massive overreaction, like the Binance hack, right? The market dumped what, like 10, 12%. And I bought maybe the 7% retrace and it kept going. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep this open. I'm not, you know, fully sized. I didn't take, you know, some outrageous leverage on this position, but I'm not going to have a clearly defined stop because I know this will stop at some point, right? And then, you know, I'll kind of play it by feel. But I wouldn't recommend that to people who are just beginning to trade or anything like that. That's like a very unique scenario. But yeah, typically on any position, you should have a place where you say, hey, you know, if it breaks this, what I think is support, then it's probably going to go down further because then it's not really support at all, right? If it breaks it and bounces.
Has your like strategy changed? So it goes without saying, like you trade with pretty good size, I think, based on your tweets and pictures and all that. And has your strategy changed as you've kind of gotten to that point versus when it was a smaller amount, or how has that kind of developed? Like, how do you manage the stress of trading big positions at a time?
Yeah, I mean, the frequency has decreased considerably, right? Because when you make a pretty solid trade with a couple $1 million, that kind of makes I mean, I don't know how much people spend, but for me, that kind of makes probably my entire month, right? I mean, if you have a 10% move and you're long $3 million, that's enough for most people to live on for like a year, right? Or 2 years, depending on, you know, which part of the world you're living in. So yeah, I mean, I would say frequency has decreased a lot, and also the necessity of scaling in and out of positions, right? And and this is kind of something I wanted to get to as well. Like, great question. People think, oh, I have $1,000. It's the exact same as trading 10 million. I mean, theoretically, yes, but also not at all, because you have a bunch of different factors that you weren't worried about with $1,000, right? You have liquidity, you have being hunted. If your position is a considerable amount of the open interest, you are a target for advantageous market participants, right? Who maybe have a bigger dick than you. Because at the end of the day, there's always going to be someone with more cash on the sidelines, which kind of ties into like why I mainly long is, you know, it's pretty easy to get squeezed and pretty noticeable if you're a large short to people who already want to buy Bitcoin and have a lot of cash. They say, oh, well, why don't I hunt this person? And, you know, their short is going to turn into a buy eventually, right? So that's kind of I wouldn't say I'm quite at that level to like be a target, but a lot of people who I, you know, talk to daily, and a lot of people in, you know, some of the groups I'm in are certainly aware of, you know, why they aren't able to post their positions, or why they're very you know, hush hush. So that's one aspect of trading that changes considerably as your wallet increases. And also, I mean, you know, the emotional aspect, right? Having a lot of money and then losing it all at once is a lot worse than, you know, not making money at all, in my opinion. And it's pretty easy to run up accounts in this market, but it's really, really hard to hold on to them if you continue the kind of like insane leverage that, turned a $10,000 account into $1 million account. You're typically going to blow through half of it, if not all of it, right? And we see this a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you get to this point where, with that run up of an account, say to 10K to $1 million, where you feel untouchable, and then that's when you start really going against, your vision on the chart. You kind of start making the chart fit your narrative.
Yep.
When maybe things. So that's another time when people, I kind of have a theory when I have a successful trade, that percentage allocated in my portfolio, I won't touch it. I'll just let it ride, or just not take another position just because and that's, again, it's a bigger picture of knowing yourself and trading to your strengths and weaknesses. So
maybe you already covered this, but you mentioned earlier why you have sort of a long bias and why that makes sense in terms of BitMEX specifically. If you could expand on that, that would be awesome.
Ooh, I mean, well, like mathematically, longs are more risky, right? Because you're putting Bitcoin for collateral to bet on the price of Bitcoin going up. So when Bitcoin decreases, longs are actually liquidated a lot sooner than shorts are. Well, not a lot sooner, but a bit sooner, just because of the way the contract is designed, right? But for me, and having traded this market for a couple years, my bread and butter has been longs, and it's quite obvious that I'm a lot better at picking bottoms than selling tops. Occasionally I'll get lucky and maybe I'll sell a top, but it's quite rare that I'm short the exact top. I'm not good, and this is just being honest with yourself, right? Which, like, a lot of trading is about. I'm not good at fading rallies. Like, I'm absolutely atrocious at, like, I was convinced we were going to top at 8.4 and like we were going to break through 7.4. Remember when we were chopping around in I think it was early June, we were chopping around like AK7.4. I was convinced like it was over. I was ready to like 1x short everything, walk away, but that's kind of where just my capitulation and like me knowing myself, I just said, listen, like this is where we have the worst strike rate. This is where we're absolutely atrocious at trading. So I mean, I think that longs make sense for a certain type of trader. Just like in traditional markets, there are long only funds and there are short only funds, right? Like certain styles of trading, circling back to that, makes sense for certain types of people. And I've noticed that Bitcoin just takes off and rallies exponentially. Whereas, like, yes, the dumps are, quite vicious as well, but they're typically prolonged. And, they take that kind of cycle takes a long time to play out, where 2017 was a great example of this. We went from 5,000 to 20,000 in like 3.5 weeks, and that should have made your entire year if you didn't touch a short button, right? I mean, easy to say in hindsight, but the explosive rallies are where the majority of my portfolio increases have been seen. So that's why I primarily take long positions. And at the end of the day,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I believe in Bitcoin. So that's also why, I'm going to be default like bullish. But yeah, anyways.
I love that. This is like, not to say I'm anywhere near the trader you are, but like that's something I noticed with myself, like going through 2018 and now I'm just horrendous at shorting. Like I can try, but like I just get like a dirty feeling where I'm like, I'm doing it, but I don't really
you're cheating on
your
significant other.
Yeah, it's just like it's like a bad emotion, It's like it's like I hope this makes money, but like kind of don't, at the same time, because then it's kind of like furthering the maybe this is all bullshit like thesis,
You're like, yes, it's fucking going lower, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really good, but
I mean, money's money, right? I don't feel bad about shorting. There are definitely times where I short, but it's just being honest with yourself. It's like, listen, right. I'm way better at punting longs than I am at picking tops. And at the same time, Bitcoin just has insane FOMO in either direction. So whether it's shorting or longing, I think you're going to have much more success picking bottoms just statistically due to the way that Bitcoin has traded since its inception. If it continues to behave like it has since it was created in 2009, you're going to make a lot more money taking longs than you are taking shorts over a long period of time, right? So that's also kind of a factor.
Hey, Flood, if you had to pick one person to be the greatest influence on you so far to date, who would it be in terms of trading?
Oh man, just one.
You could pick a couple. I mean, you could pick a couple.
Pick a couple. Yeah, because I don't want to.
You don't want to leave anyone out.
No, exactly. I mean, honestly, crypto Twitter. Just because trading Bitcoin, like trading a highly volatile 24-hour market, is so unique. Crypto Twitter as a whole helped me, but like specifically, I would say, Angelo. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Nomad as well. He's a pretty interesting guy, but he certainly is someone who has, kind of an older perspective on the markets and has a very unique way of, I mean, he's very bullish long term, like I am. So he kind of confirms my bias at times, which is pretty nice.
It's nice to have that.
Exactly. I mean, that's crucial, right? You don't want to listen to any FUD or any of that nonsense. And then, I mean, just there are a ton of people like SZ, who's CEO of Three Arrows Capital. He's been a huge influence, and like he's an extremely sharp guy. If you guys aren't following him on Twitter, you guys absolutely should. He's probably one of the brightest minds in crypto right now. I would put money on that.
Give his Twitter.
Yeah, it's
handle.
let me pull it up right now. So it's, oh god, it's I'm choking. Give me a second.
I'm anxiously like awaiting to type this in my search bar right now.
It's ZHUSU.
I know this guy.
He's the big Leo bull. And we'll see if he's right about that. But yeah, I mean, he has a very he's very intellectually intimidating. I would say that for most people who have met him. And then Crypto Ray as well. I've known Crypto Ray for probably like 2.5 years now, and he comes from traditional finance as well, and his way of looking at the market is very different to a lot of the Moon Lambo or like Doom perma bears that we kind of see on Twitter all the time. So it's nice having these kind of like rational perspectives from people who are kind of veterans in other markets or other sectors, kind of have a more nuanced take on Bitcoin rather than like, oh, I have, it's kind of hard for me to be like a rational, unbiased person if like I have 70% of what I own in Bitcoin, right? I mean, clearly I believe in it, right? So,
right.
But other people maybe have 10% and they kind of look at it a bit more objectively, and I think there's a lot of value there. And then as well, Wonton Wallet, that guy, super smart. And yeah, that's about it. Those, and I wouldn't say the last two I know very well and very intimately and personally, but Angelo and Nomad and Cobain and kind of these other people that were like really big when I didn't have a Twitter following are just as important in a different aspect, right? For more of the like, hey, we trade Bitcoin, we trade big size, and this is kind of our outlet for kind of explicitly showing what we're making. Before, I would always like be very low key, and I wouldn't even post P&Ls and stuff, and then I kind of thought like, what the hell, I mean, my OPSEC's pretty good, we'll see how good it is, right? I mean, that was the only thing that was
yeah, exactly.
I don't want to jinx anything. No, I mean, YubiKey is a great resource for anybody worried about OPSEC. It makes things pretty simple. Anyways, but yeah, that's about it. I mean, what about you guys? Do you guys have anybody in particular that you guys really like looked up to?
I think you're definitely one. I would say Cash is another one. When we had him on, I was just kind of like sitting back, just being like, okay, take as much of this in as you can, because like he's clearly much better than me. I mean, he absolutely killed it during 2018, and so he's definitely one that like kind of pops to mind when you ask that.
Yeah, for me, obviously you too, Flood. Kind of look up to you a little. I just admire your, like I had said at the beginning, admire the fact that you're transparent. I also big fan of Sicarius and Messiah. They've both kind of helped me a little on bounce some ideas off. And what I like about both of them is they're not afraid to call me a fucking idiot if if it needs to be done, and don't ever really give me the answers when I ask them questions. They kind of work it out with me, which is what I need. I sometimes, I want the answer, but at the end of the day, you need to just kind of work it out yourself. So.
Yeah, I agree. Sure. And, it's not just people you kind of are learning from, but it's also people that you may have taught a bit or helped who suddenly are shooting you ideas and you're like, oh, this is a lot better than what I've been doing. The kind of like student becomes the master in this space. We see it happen over and over again, right? There are a lot of people who started trading 2 years ago who are almost as good, if not better than I am now, right? And you just see that with these crazy like 20, 21, 22-year-old whiz kids who turn like 20 grand into $250,000. And they're not even, kind of aware of like how spectacular that is at such a young age to be able to do that. So, that's also something that I think is great in this space. Is it's a community where a lot of people who otherwise probably would not have crossed paths all can degenerately gamble on something that may or may not have a future, right? It's like it's pretty spectacular.
I also want to say I forgot one, and that's Ledger Status.
Of course. Yeah. Yes.
Good buddy, and we talk about more than just trading, and he kind of keeps me grounded. But
one of the nicest guys too. I mean, like, like we say that about a lot of people, but there's like a handful where it's like that's absolutely true.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Flood, do you have any trades that you've made that just like totally stick out, whether it's a win or a loss?
Oh yeah,
that you've made per se.
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 trades that I think really just shaped like Bitcoin trades. I mean, all coins that go like 10x, I don't really consider that like skill, or there was a period where just everything was dripping, right? I mean, you could literally pick a random ticker on Bittrex and you would wake up with your money doubled. But like, because that's what I do pretty much every day is like look at the Bitcoin chart and attempt to trade it. 3 trades that really stick out, and they're all fairly recent. So if you guys remember, like in 2017, I believe it was like late summer, maybe early fall, like September-ish. We were trading around like 4,600, and we hit 5,000 almost. And I actually shorted 4,949.5 or something. I was like, a couple points off the top, and we dumped down to 4,700, and then China FUD hit, like part 89 of episode 89 of like China banning Bitcoin, and then we dumped all the way down to 3,300. I covered my short before we broke 4,000, but I just remember that being like the just like euphoria of like, yes, like I called the exact top, like, and there was no kind of like, I was just like 5K too important. There's no way people are gonna not just absolutely nuke the price if it rejects. So I made, that was probably one of my best like P&L wise trades, not US dollar terms, but like Bitcoin terms. And then a couple weeks later, we rally all the way back to 5K, and I'm like, oh, piece of cake, round 2. Let me just short this. And we rallied to 5,800, I think, in like 15 minutes. And if anyone was on BitMEX at that time, you actually saw one of my liquidations. it was quite large. And BitMEX was swinging from 5,300 to 5,800 every couple seconds. And this was kind of one of like BitMEX's coming to Jesus moments, where actually like overload kind of became a thing, and they suddenly couldn't handle the load of like all this insane volume and leverage. But yeah, that was a time where I was like, shorting is probably a bad idea. That was where it was like, I was so euphoric, I'd called the exact top, and then I just got absolutely blown out. So that was kind of like you know, the like highs and lows of trading, right? I mean, you have it all in a very, very short period of time. And like I was bearish on the run up to 5K, of course. I thought we were going to print a lower high and dump down. I mean, because there was a period of time where, you know, people would have looked at you like you were smoking, you know, crack or something if you told them Bitcoin was going to 20K. I mean, when Bitcoin's trading, you know, 3 digits, and someone's like, yeah, man, in like a year and a half, Bitcoin is going to be $20,000. I would have been like, you are a crazy person. There's no way that's going to happen. But yeah, I mean, my bearishness kind of bled into me actually selling a considerable amount of my spot, because 5,000 was a place where I said, hey, I'm going to liquidate quite a bit of the Bitcoin I own. This is a point where like I'm going to be quote unquote like comfortable for period of time. And it's a terrible way to think, but that's just kind of like that was like my mindset of like, listen, this is a point where like I have to sell, because I've seen and like read about, you know, internet stocks that went, you know, 1999 up thousands of percent, no one sells, and then they trade to zero, never recover, which by the way will happen to a lot of your guys' favorite altcoins. Sorry to say, a lot of them will never trade at the all-time highs. They may rally, but they will never ever trade relative to Bitcoin, the all-time highs, which is all that should matter, right? But so that trade, and then I guess also you know, just calling the 5.8K bottom like multiple times and then it nuking down, right? That's the exact same principle as, you know, you're going to make a lot of money taking a trade and playing the rally, and then the one time it dumps, luckily I had learned from you know, 5K breaking and us rallying and me getting liquidated, not for everything, but you know, for a decent amount. I had learned, and I had to stop not too far under 5,800. So when it broke, no big deal. You know, that's just how it goes, right? But that's kind of, I guess what I'm trying to kind of say is like, you have to learn from your mistakes with trading. Like if you're making the same mistake over and over again and you're just getting greedy, or like you're not setting stops, or you're not selling, right? You're not able to get out of a winning trade, then maybe trading isn't for you. I mean, seriously, like if you're just coming to BitMEX every single day and this is what you want to do for a living and you just can't make money, take a break, right? I mean, that's an important aspect of trading as well, is like wait for favorable market conditions or improve your skill set. I mean, it's like quite literally sink or swim. There's no in between with trading. No one's going to hold your hand. So yeah, those trades were definitely things that kind of defined like my overall market thesis and kind of like why I'm probably 75% long, 25% short.
And the greatest thing about, if, you know, like you said, to touch on if you aren't making money, you know, step away, is you can find your own shit and research and become a better trader. You know, there might be people that kind of guide you, but as hard as you work and as much time as you put in is going to be the results that you're going to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it comes back to like being honest with yourself, you know, because like our brains are experts at rationalizing our own bad behavior, you know, and it's like you got to be real. Like there are times where I've been like, oh, maybe I'm just shit at this, you know, I just got to quit and it's not for me. But then you got to kind of have that moment where you're like, okay, well, I did this wrong, I did this right, I should have done that. I got lucky there and made money, but it was because I got lucky, not because I did the right thing. One final thing for you, Flood, before we let you go. Is so price is currently at about 9,800. If you had to guess where we head from here, maybe over the following month or a couple of months, what would be your kind of gut feeling from here?
Oh, this is such a like, oh man, I'm gonna be honest, this is such a coin flip, right? Like I'm in no position right now. Like I'm literally, I was in Mexico when Trump tweeted about Bitcoin. Thanks so much, Trump. It was great. I was like drunk on a beach. My friend messages me like, "Oh my God, Trump tweeted about Bitcoin," and then you know, what do you know? Like we have all this uncertainty when price kind of looked like it could have gone either way at 12K. But yeah, no, I mean here, I don't think shorting is. I mean, surprise, surprise. I don't think shorting is gonna be fantastic risk reward. I mean, we're probably gonna see some sort of bounce from, you know, 9.2 to like 8.8K if we get down there, which we kind of already did, right? I mean, I think we wicked down to 90 like XX or something. But yeah, I mean, from here, it kind of depends on whether we're able to clear above 11.2K, because when we did that, we kind of kickstarted another rally. Even though we dumped all the way sub 10 and, you know, ran all those stops, we kind of like immediately wicked back up. But we're not really seeing that, so there is quite a bit of uncertainty. But yeah, I mean, here, I would say wait for confirmation. There's no, you know, and this is one of those spots where it's like there's no definitive trade, at least to me. I mean, if you see something, by all means take it. But for me here, it's like, listen, I mean, I'd like to buy sub 9K, like 8.8, and I probably am going to sell 11.2. So right now we're just ranging, but I'd imagine we see some sort of bounce, some sort of mean reversion, because we kind of are in a bull market, I'd like to think. So I'm gonna kind of lean towards a long here. I'd say if someone was like gun to your head, like take a position right now, I'd say yeah, I mean, go long and pray that, you know, we break 10.4 and then hit 11.2. I mean, it's such a, and there's so many, it's so sick. Like there's so many spots like this where it's like, especially like 7.4K, where it's like, oh my God, like this could break down, or, you know, we may rally. There's no, I don't think anyone can definitively tell you, right?
It's funny you say and pray, because the first time I ever got on BitMEX, I was talking with a buddy, mutual buddy, a killer, and I was like, how the hell do you use this thing? He goes, put 1 Bitcoin in, hit the green button, and pray. And so I was just like, okay.
Yeah. Oh man.
So, well, Flood, that kind of covers everything that we want to talk about. That was great, and I think people are going to really get a good insight on your style, and hopefully they can help find what works for them. And is there anything final that you want to say before we wrap up?
Oof. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for having me on. Obviously, that comes to mind. But yeah, I mean, just final thoughts, like, just, you know, trading is not easy. Trading will kind of take over your life if you let it. And trading aside, money aside, like, be very clear with like what your priorities are, and don't let trading and Bitcoin, you know, completely consume your life. There are other things out there. So, you know, don't feel like if you're, you know, losing money on BitMEX, like you're not a good person, or you know, you'll never make money on BitMEX. Like don't get discouraged to the point where, you know, it's like gonna bleed into your personal life. And there are people behind the avatars on Twitter. So like when you guys kind of like, you know, harass people who maybe, you know, make a losing trade, like it doesn't bother me. But, you know, for a lot of these other kind of like characters on Twitter and stuff, like there are human beings, you know, behind these avatars. So like when you guys are like saying really nasty stuff in the DMs, and when you guys are kind of like being really brutal when they get stopped out, like, listen, you're probably, you know, projecting your own losses in the market, but just kind of, you know, they're taking a chance. They're like putting their trades out there, and they have a lot of pressure and spotlight on them. So, you know, lay off a little bit, like just
they got more
just,
balls,
you know,
post than that than most
yeah,
people.
exactly.
Yep.
And laugh to yourself, right? I mean, don't, you know, there's no need to like dox people. I mean, with like the whole AMH situation, like I didn't really know the guy or anything, but you know, regardless if you're like scamming people, I think it's always kind of a fine line when you start doxing people, right? I mean, that's when like stuff really gets serious, and like when lawsuits are throwing around, like let the lawsuit take care of it, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's it's real life, you know, like they're real people. But yeah, no, always stay positive, guys. Like it gets better. It's trading Bitcoin, you will improve if you keep at it.
Some of the best lessons that personally that I've learned have come from actually trading myself. You know, not anything I've read. So great message there at the end. I really, you know, echo everything you said there. A lot of these people probably are, you know, you always say don't risk more than you can lose, and a lot of these people probably doing that, I would say. So if they do post something, don't be a dickhead about it. You know, you can always bust people's balls and good fun, but when something doesn't go their way like that, you know, just kind of shut your yapper. So
yeah, we're all people at the end of the day, like you said, you know, and I think people forget that with all the avatars and all that. But I think that's a great message to leave
I do
everybody.
too. Thanks again, Flood.
Thanks so much for having me.
So much fun. Really, we're gonna have to have you on again here in a couple months when we're over 20K, right?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me rant incessantly.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks everyone for listening. Take care. Tip your waitress. Peace out. Be safe, guys. See ya.